Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they release. Today we are talking about Fahrenheit 9/11 from 2004. This is our 36th episode of our Lionsgate miniseries. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
And Charlie Nash.
Hello.
And joining us once again, super special guest, it is Chris Feil. How are you?
Strategery. Never gets old. When you say the word strategery, everyone knows exactly what you mean.
It's my favorite board game.
Oh, man. Yes, Fahrenheit 9/11, 2004, premiered at Cannes, May 2004, opened wide in the U.S. on June 25th, 2004, in 868 theaters at number 1 and maxed out at 2,004 theaters. Yeah, we'll get into how fucking insane that is. Budget, $6 million. Opening weekend made $23.9 million. Domestic gross of $119 million. And overall gross of $221 million. This made 1/3 of a Titanic. This is the highest grossing documentary film of all time and was Lionsgate's highest grossing film until The Hunger Games in 2012. Top 5 films that weekend, Fahrenheit 9/11, White Chicks, Dodgeball, I always forget there's a subtitle, A True Underdog Story, The Notebook, and The Terminal. Yeah, I'll stay home.
I saw Dodgeball. I almost said Dodgeville.
That's how that movie ends, right? They all play dodgeball.
Can you imagine if instead of the gangsters, it's just Ben Stiller showing up with dodgeballs, just whacking everybody with rubber red balls? It's funny though. I even remember I saw Dodgeball with my dad this weekend, and remember being like, "Oh, everyone's going to see Fahrenheit 9/11." Like it was in our biggest theaters of that movie theater, which is it's wild. I mean, yeah, I've never seen a documentary. I wasn't allowed to see this back then. Weirdly, Dodgeball is pretty inappropriate in many other ways, but it is that thing. It's strange to think that this was such a fucking time capsule of where we were in 2004. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dodgeball I remember fondly. White Chicks, no. I remember watching the unrated version of that with my dad, and I had not seen the unrated version. The unrated version just has an unnecessary 5-minute scene where they're just pretending to know what dildos are, and I just wanted to spontaneously combust in front of my father. But
there was a weird period of time where unrated DVDs would either be there's a scene like in Anchorman where he just says fuck 5 times and that's really it. And then I also remember renting the Logan, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, the really shitty King Arthur 2004 unrated cut with my sister, and there's full-on R-rated gore in that thing, and my sister
really?
being like, wasn't this... Yeah, I mean, it's not good, I've only seen it that one time, but people's heads are getting cut off, and my sister was like, isn't this PG-13? I'm like,
it was one time.
Yeah. And then they had one for The Ring 2 where there wasn't even anything explicit, it was just certain edits were bad.
More deer.
Gotta
have more deer. She says, I'm not your fucking mommy twice. Yeah,
oh, God. I do remember the theater losing it during that. That was pretty iconic.
Okay, but how Chris was saying in the previous episode about putting something on the big screen and everybody's going nuts and whatnot, just put Naomi Watts saying, I'm not your fucking mommy, and everybody just going, yeah! Number 1 song in the U.S. this week is Burned by Usher, no surprise there. Number 1 song in Canada is Yeah by Usher, no surprise there. This won the Palme d'Or. The first documentary since 1956 to win the Palme d'Or, and I think there hasn't been another doc since that has won.
They rarely put docs in competition, too.
Yeah.
There was one this year, the Wong Bing documentary. It's not cinema to them. And then, docs go and win Venice and Berlin. And then suddenly there's a documentary in competition.
I was just thinking about how All the Beauty and the Bloodshed won at Venice last year, which rightfully so. That film is incredible.
Hell
yeah. Fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Very surprised that this wasn't nominated for Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars. Michael Moore won Best Documentary Feature for Bowling for Columbine and got booed just because he said Bush sucks.
We like nonfiction, and we live in fictitious times. We live in a time where we have fictitious election results that elects a fictitious president. We live in a time where we have a man sending us to war for fictitious reasons, whether it's the fictition of duct tape or the fictitious of orange alerts. We are against this war, Mr. Bush. Shame on you, Mr. Bush. Shame on you. And anytime you've got the Pope and the Dixie Chicks against you, your time is up.
Very different times. But
There
apparently,
was some weird eligibility shit.
Yes.
With that, which I think it's partly because the movie aired on PBS before election night, and it worked. He put it on PBS, and people didn't vote for George Bush again.
oh God, that was a joke. I thought it was real. No.
What are you in a Michael Moore movie?
What? Yeah. But yeah, I have it right here. He wanted to run it in Best Picture instead of running it in Best Documentary.
This was the other thing, too.
But it did air in November prior to Election Day on TV, and this in turn disqualified it. But the Academy actually changed the rules after this. The movies can qualify if shown on television as long as they had a prior theatrical release period, which, of course, back then it would have been a lot different because it's like 6 months from home video or HBO or whatever the fuck they want to say it, and now it's just like 3 weeks later, so of course. But not surprisingly, Britney Spears was nominated for Worst Supporting Actress at the Razzies for this film.
God.
What the absolute fuck? Like 15 seconds of this thing, and she's
the most misogynist organization. I say organization with the largest finger quotes you have ever seen.
Yeah.
George Bush also nominated for like Worst Actor. Just hilarious. Just so funny. Oh, it's so funny. No.
This is like, I mean, that inclusion of the clip in the movie of her comments are they're not great, but like, I'm not looking to Britney Spears.
It's not different from anybody from that time.
Yeah,
everybody was saying that.
You shouldn't be looking to Britney Spears for like, I mean, look, I'm sure. I'm not gonna be condescending and say like, oh, are we really looking to Britney Spears for a political thought? I'm sure she has political thoughts and everything. It's sort of the Michael Moore thing where like it's in Roger and Me. He's like concerned about like the issues in Flint, Michigan. And he's asking like a pageant contestant about it and like hounding her with questions. And I'm like, is this really the person you should be going after about this? Like, why not the person who like helped organize the parade and like was putting money behind this? Not the person who's like necessarily the face of it and everything. It's like your points are good, but your target is occasionally like off base and everything. And I like Roger and Me, and I like parts of this movie that we're about to talk about. But it's just like really like it's a bit of a layup of a.
She doesn't even drop George Bush's name. It's such a cheap shot.
Yeah,
they literally asked, "Do you have faith in the president?" She's like, "Yes," and that's basically it. Like,
there's something similar-ish, but also it's very much knowing that this is a joke and not to be taken as serious as this one. But in Fahrenheit 11/9, he's just like, "How the fuck did we get here? We have to blame Gwen Stefani." And it's a joke, and then he's just like, "Well, it's because Trump was pissed that." Something with a voice or something like that, so he staged this fake political running for president thing, so it's just like blame Gwen Stefani, but it's obviously a joke. It's not as pointed as Britney Spears' appearances in this, but it's very much from the same ilk, I would say. Plot description from Google: Michael Moore's political documentary uses humor and connect-the-dots investigative journalism to question the Bush administration's motives for war in Iraq and Afghanistan. The film argues that President George W. Bush and his inner circle used the media to further an agenda that exploited the 9/11 attacks, the close ties of the Saudis to the Bush family, the cynical profiting of corporations, and a political elite beholden to special interests are all cited as elements of a corrupt system. Starring, directed by, and written by Michael Moore. Prior to this, Roger and Me in 1989. His only fictional film, Canadian Bacon, in 1995, which we all know. Bowling for Columbine in 2002. After this, Sicko in 2007. Capitalism, A Love Story in 2009. And like I mentioned, Fahrenheit 11/9 in 2018. Trivia. This was originally planned to be financed by Icon Productions, which is Mel Gibson's production company. After its official screening at 2004 Cannes Film Festival, the movie was given what has been called the longest standing ovation in the history of the festival. Although the exact length of applause is a matter of debate, journalists at the screening have reported it to be in the area of 15 to 25 minutes.
Pan's Labyrinth had some insane, like, standing ovation that was like a half hour or something.
Clerks 2 got like 18 minutes, okay? So
It's just insane to me as someone who literally, like, movies are so much of my life, but, like, can you imagine just standing in place and applauding for 30 minutes?
it's exhausting.
This is also why those, like, whoever is keeping the stopwatch, why it's all bullshit is, like, those directors are, like, talking and gassing up the audience, and, like, Pan's Labyrinth, for example. Like, Guillermo del Toro is someone, you put him in a public space, he's gonna talk about everyone involved with the movie because he's that kind of nice guy.
Yeah,
so it's like,
I'm sorry, Chris, maybe because I know you love this movie, but I'm just imagining, like, like Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, like, people applaud for 10 minutes, and then Lisa Kudrow shows up, and she's like, I'm sorry, I forgot my top, and then they applaud for another 15 minutes.
I'd stand and applaud for that movie for 30 minutes.
Yes.
Hell yeah. This is the first documentary in history to debut at #1 at the box office, and maybe the only one. Michael Jackson, This Is It, debuted at #1, but music doc.
Concert movies.
Yeah.
Are they really the same beast?
Yeah, the One Direction doc went to #1, but also music doc. So I think this might be the only documentary in history to debut at #1 at the box office.
Not even Hannah Montana, Best of Both Worlds, the concert movie?
Oh, I didn't look that. I didn't
Or
see
Stop
that.
Making Sense, the Talking Heads one that I feel like most people have at least seen that one.
Or Never Say Never, the Justin Bieber doc that was in
That
3D.
one went to #2. I looked it up. That went to #2.
Glee, the 3D concert movie.
They're performing as characters. It's fiction. No.
I just also think it's funny to do the time travel thing a little bit here, because when, I've been working 5 days a week, and, like, when like just a couple days ago, people were like, so what have you been up to? And I'm like, mentioned, like, well, I'm doing stuff for my pod. I rewatched Fahrenheit 9/11, and everybody gave me this, like, puzzled look of why. like no, everyone you mentioned that you watched this movie to in the year 2023 is like, why are you doing that? Like what is, I don't understand.
Yeah, it's definitely got like with the pervasiveness of social media and Michael Moore being a very online guy, that his stock is definitely tanked, even if people agree with him. It's just like, yeah, I get it, but be quiet for like a day or so.
I will also say in Boston, he's gotten a very bad reputation because there was a lawsuit that he was involved in with Boston Light and Sound where he did not pay people.
Yeah.
So couldn't help but think about that this time around. And look, we had a bunch of things to say about Lars von Trier and that coloring perspectives with his movies. This one couldn't help but do that a little bit here. So.
Mm-hmm. Michael Moore tried to fight the R rating with the MPAA. New York governor at the time, Mario Cuomo, appealed to the MPAA on his behalf, but to no avail. To the point where Michael Moore, the movie was in theaters and he was still trying to appeal it, and no, dude, like, there is real life war violence in it. What do you expect?
A beheading, like, they showed that.
Yeah.
Like, I looked away from the screen. I was like, I don't want to see this. Like, it's like not because, like, I don't want, like, truth suppressed. I just don't think that's, like, I don't want to see that. Like, it's
Yeah.
I don't think I should.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I found this. It was just like a lot of theaters pretty much were just like yada yada yada, like anybody can come in type of thing. So I don't think it made that big of a deal. Imagine buying a ticket to White Chicks and sneaking into Fahrenheit 9/11.
Those were the cool kids.
I might have told this story before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I did buy a ticket to RV and sneak into United 93. So.
Yeah. I bought a ticket to Max Payne and snuck into Zack and Miri Make a Porno, and then got kicked out 15 minutes in and had to watch Max Payne because my dad was going to pick me up in 2 hours. So what am I going to do? In May 2004, Michael Moore announced that Miramax could not release the film because their parent company, Disney, wouldn't allow it. Michael Eisner, head of Disney at the time, said the decision was made back in May of 2003, and Moore was just bringing this up to drum up controversy before Cannes. Moore's agent claimed that Eisner had expressed concern that the film might jeopardize tax breaks granted to Disney for its theme park, hotel, blah, 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 in Florida, where Jeb Bush was governor. Big surprise. Disney sold the film to Miramax as long as they agreed to donate 60% of the film profits to charity. Miramax eventually sold the distribution rights to Lionsgate Films. This wasn't the first time Miramax ended up having to offload a movie that Disney rejected to Lionsgate. Dogma in 1999, listen to our episode, and O in 2001, also listen to our episode. Although I think I remember that Miramax just kind of washed their hands of O, and not necessarily because Disney rejected it, but regardless, it's pretty funny. We've done 3 of those movies that Disney was like, no.
Hot potatoing. Yeah.
They wanted to put Miramax, like, directly after Disney bought them in 94, wanted to put out Kids, and they were just like, no, what are you talking about? And they were just like, oh, brother. So they had to make a company, I believe it's called Shining Excalibur, to put out Kids.
Yeah.
And I believe at the time, the Antonia Bird movie Priest, Disney was also like, no. And then Miramax was like, oh, we're going to put it out on Good Friday. And they were just like, are we a fucking joke? Like,
imagine an alternate universe where you can watch all those movies on Disney Plus through their Star feature in Canada.
Oh my god.
Instead, we watch Fahrenheit 9/11 on Tubi
Hoopla for me.
with ads
yeah.
for diabetes medication and life insurance. It's truly like watching this movie on MSNBC.
How fucked would it have been if they'd been showing like military PSAs like in the middle of the movie? It's like, oh,
No
military theme,
fucking
this'll
joke.
work.
Like, because that's the type of ads you get on Tubi.
It kind of is. During election time, it would be like, so-and-so doesn't support... And I'm just like, I'm trying to watch a terrible horror movie, not being indoctrinated by this shit. What are you talking about?
On top of they choose the worst moments to punctuate with an ad break.
I know.
I
It's always
also
the worst.
love playing the game Who Do They Think I Am? Like I know I've told Kevin and Bryden this story. I hope not on the pod, so I'm not repeating myself, but Chris, there was one time where I went to a wedding last December and we were all in a hotel room. Me and my friends just got a bunch of hotel rooms and we were all just hanging out, having a few drinks, and we threw on It's a Wonderful Life, which was on Bravo at like 11:30 on a Saturday night, which, you know, one of the best movies ever made, beautiful black and white American classic, and then it cuts to a commercial break, and it's like, are you on prep? And we, like, just fucking lost. If you're watching It's a Wonderful Life at 11:30 on a Saturday night and it's close to Christmas, you're probably gay and lonely. Like
Jimmy Stewart standing on a bridge. Cut to
yeah, no, it really
the
was.
update for Vanderpump
It
Rules.
was that jarring, this 1946 classic to the most 2022, just like,
Yeah.
Boys are allowed to kiss boys now, and be safe about it. Isn't that what you want to do? Like,
Congressman, trying to get members of Congress to get their kids to enlist in the Army and go over to Iraq.
The USA Patriot Act allows for searches of medical and financial records.
It gives law enforcement almost unlimited power.
They wait till the middle of the night. It's printed in the middle of the night.
How could Congress pass this Patriot Act without even reading it?
Sit down, my son. We don't read most of the bills.
No one read it.
Members of Congress, this is Michael Moore. I would like to read to you the USA Patriot Act.
Let the eagle soar.
From the corridors of power.
Congressman? Congressman?
To the streets of small-town America. To the front lines.
This is an impressive crowd, the haves and the have-mores. Some people call you the elite. I call you my base.
Comes the true story that will make your temperature rise.
Okay, that's all the trivia I have, so I'm going to get into my initial thoughts. And my initial thoughts are a rundown as I was watching the movie, so you just get to see me lose my mind in real time. My first note is, goodness, this is kind of a bore. And also all these tries at jokes fall so fucking flat. The Gunsmoke joke particularly, where it just literally looks like a jib-jab animation from the early fucking 2000s. It's really bad. And
there's
like,
a Who's Your Daddy joke, too.
It's so funny.
Who's Your Daddy joke.
It's so funny. No. So many of the same tactics are used. Like, one discussion gets brought up, and it's just like, here's what happened at this time with Dick Cheney. And also, there was another thing happening in Saudi Arabia. And who was meeting with the Saudis that day? That's right, Dick Cheney.
And it's like the sound of Michael Moore's voice gets so fucking annoying in this movie because it's like, it's just this like everything's told in this sing-songy fairy tale voice that it's just like, we get it, my dude, we get it, and we agree with you, but
relax,
stop it. Well, that was my question, and I know this might, I don't want to get too far ahead, but this movie was the biggest documentary box office success. How many people saw this who were like on the fence about George Bush is what I want to know. Like,
right.
You know,
I want to see that documentary.
Where's the cinema score?
Because Michael Moore makes films for people who want to be reaffirmed. They don't really want to be. I mean, I know he hopes to persuade, but like, the man literally 2 years ago was literally saying, "Shame on you, Mr. Bush," on a national telecast of one of the biggest award ceremonies in entertainment. Like, did anybody really go into this thing being like, maybe he's changed or something? Like, everybody knew.
In somewhat fairness to him, I think he constructs a movie that, at least in maybe the final third of it, really does make kind of an earnest attempt to appeal to someone who either might be on the fence or might actually support George Bush Jr. And maybe that's when the movie's at its best, you know, when it's just earnestly the thing that it is and not this, you know, schmuck humor.
I completely agree with you. And I think that, we'll obviously get into it. I think that, absolutely, Chris. Yeah.
I do I can't find the cinema score for 9/11, but 11/9 got an A cinema score because I'm seeing here. I had to click on fucking Fox News where the headline is Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 11/9 falls flat at the box office. Owned his ass. Wow.
Well, I mean, that one person that they polled for that cinema score gave it an A, in fairness.
Hey,
and that one person they polled is the one person who saw that movie.
Well, Kevin, you watched Fahrenheit 11/9, right?
I really liked it.
Wow.
It's very fucking long, though. Good Lord. Yeah, it's like over 2 hours, which I'm pretty sure this is also. But But the thing is, with both of these movies, and kind of a little bit Bowling for Columbine, although I fucking love Bowling for Columbine, is that both the Fahrenheit movies, it's just like, it wants to be about 30 different things at once, and it'll just go on for like 30 minutes where I'm just like, wait, isn't this a documentary about Bush? And then he just like kind of gets it back in. I'm not saying it's not interesting when it diverts and whatnot, but it's just, he has a very hard time not doing a documentary about one thing, but actually it's about like 9,000 other things, and getting it together very slowly, because like in 11/9 he talks about, it should have been the whole fucking documentary of just him talking about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, like, and he's such a huge person of Flint, Michigan and whatnot, and that's like an awesome part of it and whatnot. And then it's just like, wait, I thought that we were talking about Trump. What does this really have to do anything? And it's just like, well, the governor of Flint, Michigan, him existing is kind of like how Trump is in office. And I was like, that is the thinnest way to connect the two people. You know. Okay, what was I saying? But the thing about like how the same tactics and the same type of jokes and all the fucking, if I had to see that shot of Bush in the classroom any more times, I swear to God.
It's really easy targets. As someone who does not like George W. Bush at all, it's a very easy target to just hone in on that.
Imbued with Facebook humor.
Yes.
Yes. This is fucking Minions ass memes humor. Yeah. But it reminded me of the who's meeting with the Saudis that day? Dick Cheney. That's right. Where it's trying to be like, oh shit, you know, that type of thing. But after he does that like 90 times, it's like, I get it. They're together. Quit acting like this is a revelation, but there's a fantastic running joke that Norm Macdonald did on Weekend Update back in the day, where he would just set up a joke and be like, and who was there? That's right, Frank Stallone. And it's so fucking good.
I mean, some of that did make me think a lot about how in the 20 years we really, the news cycle, we unpack so much more and so much faster now, because like all of these things that it's like, it's not a big deal, my dude, or not a big deal, but it's like, we know, or like, you know, these things that he structures like they're gotchas, but like they're kind of flimsy and, you know, limp.
Right.
But like now it's almost like that type of movie really feels like it wouldn't work, because we unpack every step of every single horrible thing that like Donald Trump does.
Right. And that, I guess that's a benefit with 11/9, because the reason that I like had no interest before this was just like, yeah, I know, like, you're not going to tell me any revelation, and it really doesn't, and that's why I kind of do like that it diverts from Trump for a lot of it, because it's just like, everything you're telling me, either I already know, at least it's from his eye, like, as far as, like, actual experiences, and not just, like, you know, I read this somewhere, you know, but, yeah, in the opening, it made me think, because of how fucked up the Bush administration is, it can't help but to do, like, lame jokes that I think have always been a way for the culture to like yada yada the Bush administration. Like, oh, Bush was such a bad president. He said this stupid thing once when he misspoke, and it was funny, which I think leads to where like a few years ago I start to see shit where it's like, oh, Bush shared a candy with Michelle Obama. How sweet. A sentiment that I saw in person, and I was just like, fuck no, get the entire fuck out of here. Let's not memory hold this bullshit, because people tend to remember him as some goofy Texan, which is an easy way that he was able to get through a lot of shit, because people were just like, he said, fool me once, shame on you, never fool me again. Isn't that so funny?
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, and underneath he's doing the most terrible shit maybe of a modern day president. Like, it just gets memory hold so bad where it's just like, oh, he's the goofy guy who says that Kanye's comment was the worst part of his administration, which I was just like, okay, whatever.
It is weird watching this in this period of time, especially this weekend I chose to watch it, is also the weekend in which Trump was charged with 37 counts of you know,
in a row?
Where I was just like, so to what everyone was saying about the first hour being a bore, I really was like at one point just checking my phone and being like, Trump has how many counts now? Like, which is telling about how it's weird that documentaries are time capsules, but I think that the best ones that are political and have a lasting power can still hold merit throughout. And I think this is important as a cultural document. Whether it's any good, we'll get into. But like, you can watch a handful of Errol Morris docs and they'll still hold up. Like today, you can watch The Thin Blue Line and still be like, this is really provocative and still very timely and speaks to an ethical issue that we are still wrestling with today. This, I'm not saying because W. Bush is now out of office, this thing is now irrelevant, because obviously we are still in the midst of it, but it does make us consuming the news now, who are still trying to absorb as much information as possible, who live through this, and are now trying to deal with the repercussions of his presidency into where we are now, when it is a lot of cheap shots and is a lot of stuff we already know, makes it not as interesting anymore, if that makes any sense. And it's very one-sided, which is fair. Michael Moore is always one-sided. There's no rule in saying that you have to show both sides, but it does become less interesting. I feel like I just jumped into initial thoughts, so I'm just going to stop talking.
That's definitely a criticism he has with Fahrenheit 11/9. He very much shows both sides. He shows Obama showing up to Flint, Michigan, and being like, "Look, I drank a glass of water. Everything's fine." And people were just like, "What the fuck, dude?" It's much more centered and all around with that documentary, probably because it has over 2 fucking hours to do that. But I like that documentary. I'm just being an ass. But yeah, let me wrap up real quick. But yeah, the first half is like really rough overall, but the second half is when it really starts to grab me, where it's basically just raw footage of the time and just lets it do it all the talking. And the best part is this depressing clip where a mother reads her son's like last letter home, and her husband being upset that they're not the only family going through it, and for what. And makes me think of just how everybody was like so behind Bush in the war and patriotism and all of that at the time. And then to feel the consequences of it, they kind of had to literally experience it. And they realized that it was for nothing. And that's what is so fucking depressing. Like, we'll probably talk about it, but God, that scene where Lila, the woman whose son died, goes to the White House, and then some fucking random woman comes up to her and is like, oh, it was all stage. And, like, the anger she has on her face when she's talking to her, and then literally just collapses because she's so fucking sad afterwards, is incredible. It's incredible shit that it has. But yeah, it's probably not gonna change your mind. It's not revelatory, but I mean, for that second half, that's some good shit, and it makes me definitely yada yada. The first half being really boring, but overall I kind of like it, and it's not as good as Bowling for Columbine, which might like top 2 documentary ever, and I rewatched for this, and it's still fucking phenomenal. I love that documentary so much. That documentary is so good that Marilyn Manson could be in it, and it doesn't make the score go down.
Oh boy.
But yeah, all that to say that I rewatched Oliver Stone's W, and it made me really feel for. But no, I'm kidding. Anyways, remember when Bush ducked that shoe that guy threw at him? That was kind of cool. Okay, I'm done. Chris, initial thoughts.
I mean, to kind of piggyback on what I think the conversation's been going, it's not just because things have gotten so much worse that this movie feels like I don't want to be so glib to say quaint, but like the movie just like doesn't hold up and doesn't have any, I think there's also a relative to use a harsh word, artlessness about a lot of the construction of this movie, whereas like you compare it directly to something like Bowling for Columbine, which feels like a tapestry of an issue, and this feels like this weird hodgepodge.
It feels like a documentary that's only on Tubi.
It feels like a documentary where you get sudden ads for not even Chrysler, but for like car insurance. Like I just don't think that this is one of the good Michael Moore movies, or like one of the well argued things. And like, sure, I think he knows he's somewhat preaching to the choir, and like I don't know if that's necessarily a wrong way to approach, documentary filmmaking or nonfiction filmmaking, but it's this movie does feel largely to what end, especially like this is the Bush administration. We had the Daily Show doing this in 5-minute bits, so much better, and being asked to do a 2-hour movie version of that's not as good and not as funny, and it feels like tire spinning a little.
But I am curious, like, would this work if we didn't, and Bryden, I'm sorry, I'm going to infantilize you a little bit. If we didn't live through it, like, does it work? Bryden didn't really give it that good a review, so I don't think so. But I'm just wondering, like, of somebody who didn't live through all of that, does this feel more revelatory or anything like that? And by Bryden's rating, I would say probably not really, because it's not like 9/11 happened and then they were just like, remember when 9/11 happened? Not like that. It's something that is always talked about, and everything is always, well, we got to this because, it's always it's the start of the century, which everything is judged upon because nothing is the same after that. So it's like
one fucked up question that I had, which it might not even be healthy to ask this, but
he's gonna do it.
But how would we have viewed this movie? Because this came out in the summer of 2004, months before Bush got elected. So how would we view it if John Kerry won? You know, would we be like, well, this movie did its job, sort of, and then it's, I mean, I know that's not fair, because by saying George Bush was reelected, therefore this movie is a failure, that is not on the movie, obviously, but it was such a big cultural hit. Like, if this was a documentary that made no money, and that happened, but the fact that it was such a huge hit, I couldn't help but think about that a little bit while watching this. And I have no answers either, but it did kind of swim around in my head while watching it.
This isn't even me getting into my initial thoughts, but like, I mean, it's the thing I see people talk about on Twitter, where it's like when a rich person praises like a satire about like, you know, eat the rich and everything. It's like shows like, I don't know, movies can sail over people's heads, or like it doesn't change their lives. Like, it's that kind of thing.
Okay, I said the release dates, and I didn't even parse that this is a summer release, and it made $200 million.
It's a summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
so
it's not
wild.
Right before 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It was in every multiplex in America.
Yeah.
Everybody saw it. Like,
I think it still works with or if not, because, I mean, it was made before the election, and there's no, like, I don't feel like I could be wrong, but I don't feel like he's being like, come on, we need to internalize this so that we can change the, like, even if he obviously,
you don't?
Well, not really. I feel like it stands alone by itself, even though he did get reelected, because it does show all the fucked up shit that is still going to happen. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm saying that it doesn't feel like it doesn't end on like a go out and vote November 8th type of thing, but
it's not Roger and Me, where like they're trying to like, where they are, I feel like, leaving information like to try to like, don't they leave information at the end of Roger and Me to like say like, hey, maybe try to like fix this ongoing issue and stuff like that? I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, it is totally, it would be different. Like, what if he made this movie in 2010? Would it be as incendiary, or would it be as, you know, I could be wrong at just forgetting things, but it just doesn't feel as very, like, you know, that one-noteness of, as far as, like, this has to stop, as far as, instead of this has to stop, be like, this is what happened type of thing. That's why I'm feeling that it still ages certainly well, because even if he did get reelected, or even if you're watching this 20 years from now, it's like, this is what happened. It's not the video for Eminem's Mosh, which is a critique of Bush, where after he got reelected, they changed the ending of it, where it was just like, instead of go out and vote, it was now like, I don't know, sorry. Had to bring up Eminem in the mid-2000s, I'm sorry. Brighton, initial thoughts.
But, so yeah, no, I mean, you hinted at it earlier, but I would have been 5 when this movie came out, so...
Oh my God.
You know... wasn't exactly like politically locked into, plugged into this, into what was going on at that moment.
But it's a big summer movie. You didn't go see it with the whole family?
Mom, I don't want to go watch White Chicks.
It was the R rating that kept me out. But let's face it. If it had been PG-13, my parents were like, "Wow, all right, we'll make an exception." I would so yeah, like I give this like 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I agree with what Kevin said. The second half definitely helps, although the fact that this movie is 2 hours long, and you know, you think of a movie like Roger and Me, which is like focusing on like the issues affecting this one town, you know, Flint, Michigan specifically, and like it's like the factories closing, which has like many different like effects going in different directions, but like it is a much more, not just like a diminish the importance of it, but it's a much smaller scale issue,
more
and everything.
Contained.
And the scope, that's the phrase I'm looking for. The scope is much smaller and everything, and it's like a 90-minute movie, and it's like that movie to me feels like a very like a perfect bullet and everything. He's like, and he gets through like the context very quickly in terms of like setting it up and then looking at like, here's what's going on right now. And I think in a way where, yeah, he has jokes in that movie, and he uses like, you know, ironically jaunty music, although, you know, in the case of like that movie, there's like the bit where the guy like talks about like, you know, quitting his job and trying to cheer himself up, and then Wouldn't It Be Nice comes on the radio. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what the hell's going on? And then Michael Moore plays the actual song, and it's like, that's on the nose, but it's like, then sometimes life is just fucked up in that way, where on the songs like soundtrack your life. In Fahrenheit 9/11, it's like George Bush is showing on a vacation, and they play Vacation by the Go-Go's, and I'm like, I love that song, but also like that's the easiest fucking joke in the world.
I feel like 5-year-old you, when this movie came out, could have been like, I know what song to put underneath that.
Yeah.
You know what? Yes. So yeah, and the point of like the scope of it all, and it's like, this is like such like a a huge issue in terms of like all the stuff that was leading up to it and all the different like parties that were involved. And look, so I'm not like, I was not super familiar with, I was like vaguely familiar with this history. I think this movie works adequately as a history lesson and everything, or in sort of in terms of like laying out like all the stuff that happened. I guess Moore wants to be thorough because, you know, in hearing about like vaguely about some of the reporting that was going on, it sounds like there was a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation going on. So I guess he wants to just like cover all his bases and be as accurate as possible. But that doesn't necessarily equate an interesting or well-crafted movie. I mean, it's like, again, like with the on-the-nose jokes and like the very smug delivery system where it's like these very roundabout jokes where I'm like, I feel like you were diluting your point. It would be better if you just told me. I don't have a problem with bluntness. I do have a problem with you wasting my time and being condescending with these fucking bad jokes. There is like, you're right that there was, Chris, you said there was like an artlessness to it. I would say that's true for the first hour, especially where, especially like the most like generous thing I can say is like, he does like a good job of I guess, cutting across different interviews where it's like people like conveying like sort of a continuing train of thought as one person and like as they're discussing how this fucked up stuff happened. And like you get like some good sound bites. I do think it's very funny how condescending Moore is like throughout the documentary and everything. And then when he's asking about like people reading legal briefs and everything, the guy says, sit down, son. Not everyone leads the legal briefs. I was like, oh shit, he's getting the Michael Moore treatment right now. I thought that was kind of funny. Even as fucked up as what this guy's saying is, it was kind of funny. And I will say like more like, you know, these like very outlandish stunts that he will sometimes do in public and everything, like in Bowling for Columbine, where he goes to like a bank. I rewatched a clip where he goes to the bank to get the free gun, and that's like actually a case of like his sort of prankster-ish stuff.
That stuff works. His humor in Bowling for Columbine works for me for the most part.
Yeah, it's illustrative of like it's used to illustrate a larger point in like a way that's very effective. Whereas here, it's like, I'm gonna read the Patriot Act in an ice cream truck, and then but then like they cut away from it after 10 seconds. Like, you're not really committing to the bit.
You rented a whole truck for 10 seconds of film, sir.
Yeah, I would say like it helps like to sort of like cover the first hour. It mainly is just like covering these the historical points and everything, and that's like good for information and everything. But like a movie should also be like well crafted and like have a point of view and also try to do interesting things cutting wise. Then it's the second hour where like after all this build up where he is like hammering home a lot of the same points, I feel like when he finally gets to like the Iraq invasion, that's when the movie really like finds like its area of focus and everything, and where honestly like the art, he does become more artful in his editing. I mean, Roger and Me, like it is reminiscent of like some of the directness and like the sort of blunt force cross-cutting that's like happens in like Roger and Me, where like, you know, at the end of that movie it's like, you know, Roger Smith like, you know, reading about like, you know, ideal like Christmas time scenarios, and then like cross-cutting that with like a woman being evicted from her house on like Christmas Day and like how fucked up it is and everything. And in this scene it's where it's like, you know, counting down between like sort of the very banal of like sort of makeup routine of like, you know, George Bush he's about to like address the nation and everything, and it's like the countdown to that being recorded and the countdown to like them bombing Baghdad and seeing like all like the montage of like just like ordinary life. And yeah, it's a foreign country, but it's also like very recognizable and everything. Like these are people that could just as easily it's the same things that people in North America enjoy. Not that like it matters that like same customs are shared and everything, but like it's you know, going to a carnival and stuff, and then like having that all ruined. You really do feel the impact of like just how destructive this presidency was. And also like, yeah, the Lipscomb stuff, like that character, I mean, the arc that she goes through and everything, how like you keep returning back to her and everything, and then where she is like in the second interview when she's in her home, she's talking about her son being in the States, and you're just like, and then like when it cuts back to her, it like sometimes the documentaries I just lose track of faces and everything, and I realize like, oh, this is the woman that we've been seeing like every 15 minutes for like the last 15 periodic minutes or so, and it's so devastating. And yeah, I mean, like her talking about like hanging the American flag, and then like one of the last scenes you see of her in the movie is looking up at the American flag at the White House and everything. It's just like it's completely tainted to her now. It is very devastating. And again, like I said, this is where the movie finds its focus in showing the disillusionment. And I will say also with the music in this movie, I mean, again, it's like the sort of Roger and Me thing where it's like how fucking cruel life can be with like on the nose soundtracking, but then like you also, and like in the first half of Fahrenheit 9/11, it's like vacation over vacation footage. But then like you get these numbskull soldiers and everything. Obviously not representative of every soldier in the U.S. Army, but the guy's saying like, well, we wanted to play "The Roof is on Fire" because it symbolized the roof being on fire. And I'm like, first off, that's not symbolism, that's literalism. But also, what the fuck? That is so fucked up. And it's just like, it's like, man, some people just are very on the nose in like the worst way possible. And then like,
oh
yeah,
I live in Oklahoma. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I also want to point out, in hearing about these movies that were being made around this time period, yes, it's a one-sided movie, but it is a perspective, and it is a stance that is very critical of this presidency. And I want to take a moment to highlight the miniseries that came out last year that Scout Tafoya, friend of the show, past guest, and he and Tucker Johnson did, where they were talking about, they did a whole episode where they were talking about post 9/11 cinema and how there was like often, and they talk about Fahrenheit 9/11, but how for the most part there was a failure for like mainstream American cinema to actually like take a critical stance on this and everything. Either it was like just sort of documenting it in a just the facts ma'am sort of way, or it would be like sort of dealing with it in like kind of an indirect way, like torture porn, like dealing with like the fucked up torture that was going on overseas. Or you would have movies that would try to deal with it and they'd like bomb, like who the fuck saw Rendition or Syriana and everything. It's like that kind of stuff.
Welcome to my podcast.
Is Rendition the movie that if y'all say it, you play that fucking song?
Yes.
And
Mother of God.
And just tell me he's okay.
Exactly.
Which I saw that trailer so many times in theaters.
There was some episode of This Had Oscar Buzz where y'all said that title like 8 times, and Joe laid it in every single time, and I was losing my goddamn mind.
Can I ask you a question, Bryden?
Please.
And I'm sorry that I'm not meaning to make you like answer for everyone who didn't live through this, but I think it's telling that this was such a huge cultural document in terms of entertainment and not in terms of historical accuracy. Like if you have not lived through 9/11, but you want to learn about it, like, would you turn to this thing? Would you direct people to say, this is what we lived through? Or would you just say, this is a film that was very much a product of our time? You know what I mean? Like,
it's a good question. I mean, like, I guess it, for me, like, in terms of, like, clarifying some things for me or, like, refreshing my like I said, my vague knowledge of this and everything. And that's just me sometimes, like, I should be better informed in some areas of my life, even though I know Bush was bad. That is, like, a thing that I've known for most of my life. It is, like, a thing where in terms of like presenting the information, it's like it's not it's very thorough, but also it could stand to be more concise and also like have a better tone to it in terms of like not the condescension that more brings to it, having a point as well that like makes you like actually like try to think about it and engage with it. Whereas like I feel like I said, I think the first hour of this movie is like, I think its problem is like it is just like laying out information, and then the second half is where it really tries to find its points, and that's where more sort of finds its footing. I feel like I kind of evaded your answering your question. I'm sorry if I did.
No, I got it.
No, I also asked you a very loaded question, so like I appreciate you answering me sincerely, because I feel like as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, is that too big of a thing to ask? Like,
no, well, no, and also I guess the other question is like, turn to this movie to like get information on it. It's like it shouldn't. In a better world, this shouldn't be the only movie to like bear the weight of like giving the answer from the perspective.
Of course,
read other sources of information, watch other movies about this and everything. If there are other movies about this that like actually like give you good perspective and information on it, but
yeah. Remember me.
There you go. As featured in that video essay series I talked about.
Extremely loud and incredibly close. Yeah.
Terrible.
Oh,
yeah. Charlie, before you give your initial thoughts and pretty much final thoughts, did y'all know that Michael Moore directed a System of a Down music video?
No.
Because I did not.
What song?
Wow.
Yeah.
Boom from Steal This Album. Yeah, 2003. Did not know that.
Oh, I remember that one. Was that the album that was just like it was just white and it looked like someone had written on it in permanent marker? Yeah. Talk about a fucking time capsule of a band right there. Jesus
Hell
Christ,
yeah.
those guys were huge. I remember when Mesmerize came out and everyone was listening to that thing, including
Toxicity
me.
came out a week before 9/11.
Holy shit.
And a week after 9/11, the Glitter soundtrack was
released.
released.
The Glitter soundtrack.
I also remember, I mean, I think my first exposure to System of a Down was BYOB being in Guitar Hero World Tour, and it's oh, it's not bring your own beer, it's bring your own bombs, right? Isn't it like bring your own bombs or something like that?
Yes.
Like, that's what the acronym is?
Yeah.
It's like,
oh, yeah.
Shit. Yeah.
Why do they always send the poor? Why do they always send... That was like... God, this is a time capsule. That was like a video that was on MySpace pages by people who were like 14 and I was in middle school with who didn't even understand really what that song was about.
Great song.
Yeah, great song. Yeah, no, it's such a weird thing to talk about this movie for me, because I mentioned earlier I was not allowed to, not allowed, like, I'm sure if I saw it my parents wouldn't really care, especially in retrospect where I am now, but it was like an R-rated movie. I was 13, so I didn't see it when it came out. I think I either saw this, and I feel bad that I don't have a very vivid memory, I definitely watched it either at the end of the Bush term or the beginning of the Obama term, and it even then, it felt a little, like, not dated, because that's the wrong word, but it felt like we've moved past, like,
like
understanding.
Chris was saying, it's just like, what else? And you're like, oh, that's it? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And now rewatching it, where we are today, it's like, again, as we've all mentioned, I think the last half, in which Moore removes himself and lets the material speak for itself, is ultimately what's best. Because I remember taking a documentary class in college, and I remember one of the biggest points of, like, you make a like, the two things I remember most about that class were all documentaries are biased. Yeah. They present themselves as not being biased, but they are a sequence of images that have been recorded of people talking, and they are edited in a sequence to make you manipulate it. They are presented as facts, but they are very much an argument. Moore is not even trying to hide the fact that he is presenting an argument, or a one-sided argument for that matter. So, but it's, again, like we've talked about, it's the context in which he goes about cheap jokes, smug, condescending attitude towards the audience. The other thing that I thought about that did stick with me, and why I kind of was like thinking about this the entire time, is, documentaries, especially political ones, which this is, of course, obviously a very political documentary.
What?
It's used to inspire a call to action. And I think that I couldn't help it, it wasn't on my mind as a 13-year-old boy when this came out, but thinking about Moore really did, I can't help but think Moore really tried to use this movie to not get to get Bush out of the White House. I mean, and to say, well, it didn't work, so the movie failed, that's not anybody's fault. I mean, Jesus Christ, we couldn't stop Trump with the fucking most explicit fucking disgusting shit you could have possibly leaked to the press. It didn't work. But
that's because Adam McKay didn't nail his feet to the fire when he should have.
You brought up Adam McKay, and I was thinking about Adam McKay the entire time when I was watching this, where sometimes I think Michael Moore's legacy, in terms of what he's most remembered for or influential about, is bad stuff like Adam McKay. Like, he's influenced Adam McKay's humor in The Big Short, in Vice. I didn't even see Don't Look Up, but it's that same type of smug talking down. Who is this movie for? Well, it's a call to action, but this movie, I don't know, I wasn't, an adult in 2004, so I don't know how many people saw this thing and actually did change their mind. I don't know how effective it is. In terms of analyzing it and in what I can see, I'm a very liberal person. I think what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and his whole administration did is absolutely awful, but it's also one of those things where you feel conflicted, being like, well, if I don't like this aesthetic choice, and I wouldn't make this aesthetic choice because it all feels cheap and, as you said, Chris, artless. And then it makes me feel kind of bad being like, I'm someone sitting on my couch watching a documentary and not doing anything for political action other than, talking about this. But at the same time, it is important because it's important to talk about this as a cultural artifact that exists and is going to be existing as, not just a historical document, but as a form of art and as a form of entertainment. And that's the thing. I think Moore is sometimes more prioritized with entertaining people and getting them to laugh at his dumb jokes than he is about fully delivering home something that could be truly crushing and not just kind of, appealing to his fan base. And he can make whatever the fuck movies he wants. It's that thing where I'm just like, you can present your politics however you want. I like most of your politics. I just don't like the execution. And I think the first hour, yeah, it feels like a bad PowerPoint. The sequence in which we talked about the woman at the White House talking about how her son was killed, I will admit I got a little emotional watching it this time because I live with someone who is a veteran who was deployed in the Middle East when this movie was released. And I actually asked him about it, and he said, I never saw it because I hate Michael Moore. And I was like, okay. And I was like, and he was like, yeah, I'm not. And I was like, were you also like not seeing it because you were already out there? He was like, well, yeah, A, I didn't really have access to movie theaters, and B, why would I watch this movie when I was already out there? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I can't fucking blame you. And he's like, and yeah, why would I ever want to rewatch this other than to trigger myself all over again? So, but the ending, it is very gotcha of them going up to certain congressmen and being like, will you enlist your child? Will you enlist your child? And stuff like that. But, you know,
it's kind of telling, though. That...
Yeah, it's very telling and very upsetting. And I do have to admit, you know, I've heard a lot of stories from my roommate's deployment that are really horrific and really awful. And it did get me emotional, and I know that's not even necessarily criticism. I'm not even talking about this objectively as a film, but it did work for me in terms of that point sticking to me and what I've, you know, my own relationships with people who have served. And so that did work for me. The other thing that I thought of, as soon as I watched this movie, I looked back at reviews for when it came out, and my friend Ty Burr, who, you know, is the former critic of the Boston Globe and is a great, not just a wonderful person, but a great writer, I looked up, he gave the movie 3 stars, but I read his review. And is it okay if I just read this passage real quick? Because I think it's actually kind of important. Yeah. His last 2 paragraphs are, one last thought, Fahrenheit 9/11 is many things, but for pity's sake, let's not call it a documentary. To do so abuses the word and shames the good and balanced work done by filmmakers as storied as D.A. Penbaker and Barbara Kopel, as current as, I'm going to butcher this name, Jahan Nujum of Control Room, and as hardworking and heralded as Karma Hinton of Brookline's Longbow Group. Moore, by contrast, is a maker of agit entertainment, of cinematic essays whose express purpose is to convince. That's fine as long as he's respecting his audience. But when he pushes the camera into Lipscomb's weeping face and keeps it there, he's saying that he doesn't trust you to think for yourself. And that's when he becomes his enemy. So, I do agree with that to a certain extent, is documentaries are meant to be manipulative. Documentaries are meant to be persuasive. I do think more, it's the issue that I always have with him, is I always think he puts his foot in his mouth, filmmaking-wise, more so than anything else. So I've a lot of contradictory thoughts, and honestly, sometimes I don't even know if I'm intelligent or enlightened enough I try to be as politically aware, but I don't even know if I'm even educated enough to talk about why
Charlie,
this movie
real
does
fast,
and
who's the
work.
president right now? See, you don't know anything.
John Adams.
Is the guy that looks like Paul Giamatti? Yeah.
No, what you have to if I get hit by a cab, what you have to do is to remind me is, do you know what the date is today, and when does Killers of the Flower Moon come out? And I would know the answer to both of those.
Well, being that we went long on Dogville, just kind of wrap it up here. I do want to get Bryden, I'll just give you 5 minutes to talk about Michael Moore and his acting role in Lucky Numbers.
Not his finest work, although I do have affection for that movie, and I've heard people say get mad about it's just like showing people getting killed and thinking it's funny and everything. And I actually do think some of the stuff in that movie is very funny and everything, and it's just because it's people trying to get themselves out of these bad situations and then just making things actively worse for themselves because they're fucking idiots. But yeah, no, it's maybe creepiness overload where he's a guy who's a chronic masturbator and also is has incestuous feelings for his cousin Lisa Kudrow, and I'm like, okay, that's just that's not funny. Don't really like that.
That's the second Lisa Kudrow reference we've made in this episode, which is very wild.
Yeah.
The answer to your question, who's the president? Lisa Kudrow.
Lisa Kudrow, yeah.
Where's the 4K of Lucky Numbers? We don't have a Blu-ray of the hours, but most importantly, we need 4K Lucky Numbers.
We missed the window back in 2020, but we'll get it in 2025.
I will say I also had Romeo and Michelle on my mind because I was in Best Buy just a month ago and it was literally on sale for $5, and I was like, I can't walk away from this. Like, what are you $5 for the Blu-ray? Are you insane?
$5? Get out of here.
I saw that the other time. They didn't have it today, though, unfortunately. If anybody has any more final thoughts on Fahrenheit 9/11 or Michael Moore as a whole.
Any more thoughts?
It's just very funny to me to think if there are any longtime listeners who will like then get to this episode who will be like, they're liberal. Like,
well, fuck them. We didn't want their non-existent money to begin with.
I would say, I guess my final thought is on this Palm win, which understandably, there was some question at the time of the festival of whether or not this would have distribution at all. So it's like, I understand the jury, in giving it the Palm, essentially ensuring the chances for this movie to get a release in the States before the election. I understand that. It is not a Palm win that ages well at all. And not every Palm winner is a good Palm win. But
what would you have given it to out of curiosity?
Yeah.
Oh, I looked up the lineup last night and I was like, this film would be better, this film would be better, this film would be better.
I was like, I've only seen Shrek 2 and Fahrenheit 9/11 from this lineup, and I have to be certain that a better movie than Fahrenheit 9/11 was in that lineup.
I mean, for me, this would be rectified with this director's next film at Cannes. I would give it to Weera Sethakal for Tropical Malady. Though that movie's Cannes reception was very, very fraught, so that was not in the realm of reality.
I've not seen that movie, and I always thought the title of it was Tropic Malady. Doy, oh brother.
That movie, I think, should have. I agree with you, Chris. That was a far more deserving win. The Holy Girl. The Lucretia Martel film was also in competition.
Backup.
Yeah, that's another great one. Nobody knows. I know that the Japanese actor was only 12 or 14 when he won for playing a 12-year-old. That was a pretty awesome historic win that year. That movie's also great. Creative film. There was one other. I was texting people. What was the third one that I was like, that also would have been a good win?
I'm trying to think of what Old Boy is there.
Old Boy is there.
Oh, 2046. Was that the one that you were thinking of, Charlie?
Well, I haven't seen 2046 because I need to, but I also need to rewatch In the Mood for Love because I watched it on the heels of a breakup and that movie destroyed me, and I think it's one of the best movies ever, but I was not emotionally ready to revisit it, so need to see 2046. Old Boy. Also, did that get second prize? Because Tarantino, it was because Tarantino was the jury head, and then I think they even advertised that movie with Quentin Tarantino Presents, right? Did they?
Probably.
Or am I getting that mixed up with Hostel and still have leftover cabin fever, like tidbits
from the man who brought you Hostel, 2046. Yeah. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kev Bonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at J Doyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CT Nash91. Once again, thank you for listening.